Good afternoon and welcome to Remake or Demake, the show where we take two pieces of work, the classic and the remake, and we duke it out over who did it best. My name is Lloyd Fitzgibbon and I will be pro for the original, and today moderating is David Sheehan.
Hello.
David, what games are we doing today?
Today we are doing a remake or demake on the original Starwing, also known as Starfox in America, and the Nintendo 64 remake, which in Europe is known as Lylat Wars, and in America is called Starfox 64. So on the side of Starfox 64, we have Mr. Vincent O Brien.
How are you doing?
So Vince, I'm looking forward to this. For the purposes of clarity, we'll just call them Starwing versus Lylat Wars. Starwing is the first game I played on the Super Nintendo, and I feel that Starwing is the better game, and here's why. Starwing has a far better sound and atmosphere than Lylat Wars, in my opinion. The music was done by Hajime Hirasawa. He never worked for Nintendo after that. He quit shortly thereafter.
Oh, really?
And the soundtrack is amazing. It's just incredibly atmospheric, and it's, at the time, it was very clearly inspired by Star Wars, and it really just had this real bombastic flair. It almost like they managed to get a sound of almost like an orchestra coming out of the SNES chip. And to give you an example, I'd love to open up with the Corneria piece, which just really gets you in for the sense of adventure and just really kicks off the game.
And we're back. That was a great song, Lloyd. Very interesting point that guy, I can't even remember his name, only worked for Nintendo once. I thought basically every Nintendo piece from that era was all produced by Koji Kondo. I think Mario theme, Zelda themes, Metroid stuff, all Koji Kondo. Can you say his name again?
Hajime Hirasawa. He didn't quite work for them once. That was his big title. He started working for them in 1989.
Okay.
And he did a couple of small pieces for them, but that was his triumphant one. And then afterwards he set up a company called Faith Incorporated, so he just does music for movies and things like that now.
Okay, cool. I'm going to pass it back over to Vince. Vince, have you got thoughts on Lylat Wars out of the gate?
Yeah, of course. Like, my thing with the game was the way the game builds, because obviously, like, with Starwing on the Super Nintendo, they didn't have quite as much to work with in terms of technology, but when they were given the N64 all the extra power, they were then able to actually build on it. So you say, like, the original Starwing references Star Wars in terms of some of the music and things. Some of the themes that are followed through in Star Fox 64 are able to make more references directly to other media in terms of the actual boss encounters and stuff. There's a giant flying half of a robot who is looking for his creator, which is a reference to another science fiction work, which is escaping me right now. They were able to kind of create an actual story in terms of, you have a progression where you start off in Corneria, which is already destroyed. You arrive to a city which is completely in ruin, and then you leave that stage, you move on to a stage which is just getting ready to get destroyed. When you get to Katana, you arrive at a stage where the boss for that stage is going to destroy the stage. It's going to turn it into the next Corneria. As soon as you pass the sun, overrun, you are now at the Venom's bases. You're not at a stage where you're no longer defending overrun planet. You're not at a stage where you're stopping a planet from being overrun. You're on the other side of the solar system, and you're now going for Venom supply bases. You're destroying the actual enemy's bases, and then you're heading into the final two stages, Area 6 and the Bolus Air Defense Station. You're not at your defensive side of the solar system anymore. You're clearly in the enemy's field, and you're destroying their defenses. You get that sense of progression. I think you get that far greater in the remake, shall we say, of Lylat Wars than in the original game.
So if I can paraphrase you a little bit, Vince, there, you like not the straight up story, but sort of the implied narrative of starting in a war where you're already on the back foot and you're kind of losing, and just tracing a path across the path of destruction.
Oh yeah,
led by the invading army.
Yeah, you come into Corneria City. It's the first, like when you come down that first valley in Lylat Wars, the first thing you see is Corneria City, and it's like, this is terrible. It has been destroyed. You are in your home base. It has been ravaged by the enemy.
Giant robots pushing buildings over.
Yeah, indeed. You know, there is an army, they have invaded you, and then pass through the asteroid field, or depending on the path you take, obviously, because Lylat Wars has a multiple path options. But say if you were to go straight down the middle through the stage, you're going to go through an asteroid belt, and then onto your next stage, which is Katana. Like I said, it's a stage where they're facing the exact same thing. The base at Katana is perfect, except for the fact that if you mess up that stage, it gets nuked from orbit. In terms of the original game being this is sort of like Star Wars. I mean, Katana is 100% Independence Day.
I was going to ask, was Katana the Independence Day ripoff, or the a bomb has been planted on the base stage?
Oh, yeah, it is indeed. And even the character who joins you on that stage, the NPC, is Bill Gray, and that's like a reference to the colonel in Independence Day who flies into the thing is called, I think it's a Colonel Grayson or something to that effect. But the name,
knowledge of Independence lore is not as high as
yeah, indeed. And Bill Pullman is the actor from Independence Day. It's not even a case of like that sort of a reference to that. It's 100% is a reference to Independence Day.
And a reference to an earlier piece of media you were talking about where a robot was looking for their creator out in the distant stars. That's obviously going to be everybody's favorite film and everybody's favorite robot, V'ger from Star Trek The Motion Picture.
He is looking for, whereas the creator is a line from that.
Pass it back over to Lloyd.
You make some really, really strong points. There's some really interesting stuff narratively.
Thank you.
But I still think there was actually sometimes more imagination in the original, which is surprising. Because, okay, you had structure in this one was three very much set levels. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, which are three paths actually going up in difficulty.
Oh, yeah.
But what I found really fascinating was that they also got a bit more interesting as they went up in difficulty. For example, when you leave the Corneria, you have the asteroid belt, and the music, which we'll be playing shortly, feels very much like being in a Star Wars movie, which I said it's very bombastic and very epic. It's actually, the view is a first-person view. You really feel like you're in the cockpit for that thing. But as it goes on, you're flying in through ships, and you're blowing up the ships from the core inside, and then it shows you flying out of them, and it just gives this real sense of taking out the things by just from the innards in between. It almost makes it a little more grand in scale by doing it that way, by flying into these cores. But later on, there's other really interesting level designs. For example, one of the planets is a weather station. There's this fog that kind of covers a lot of stuff, and you actually have to take down various weather units, and the actual atmospheric effects change then when you take down the stuff, because the idea is that the weather unit has actually kind of run riot on the planet. It's not working right. And so when you take that out, the weather effects change, and then the weather unit itself actually attacks you.
Dark confession, Lloyd. I think I've only played Starwing when I was a young child. I think I was too bad at the game to even get to the level you're talking about.
Yeah, that's not even getting into the hard. That was the medium route, and then level 3 in one of my favorites. It was just so weird. There was a two-headed, two-tailed dragon on Fortuna in that game, and not only was the music weird as hell, it was just a weird level, and you had to actually pummel the dragon's heads with your Starwing blasters to kind of get it to shrink back into its body. I just thought it was just really inventive, it was really imaginative, and the music was just so weird and otherworldly that it felt so alien.
So what I'm hearing so far is that Vince likes the way that Lylat Wars tells the story, and Lloyd likes the way that Starwing makes him feel. You're saying that you like to, is the giant two multi-limbed dragon from Venom? Is that where you'd fight him?
No, it's on Fortuna, actually.
Okay.
Fortuna.
Did you want to play that asteroid theme?
Yeah, the asteroid theme, which I think it's the closest I felt like at the time to being in a really good Star Wars game.
Okay, we'll transition into this for a little bit, and we'll be right back. So that was the Asteroid Field, and we're back here. Vincent, I wanted to ask you a question. You didn't bring any songs in particular to showcase Lylat Wars. Do you not like the music in it?
No, it's not a case of not liking the music to it, but when it comes to Lylat Wars, I think what's far more memorable than the individual tracks, although some of them are obviously outstanding, such as the Starwolf theme, which is one that has been remixed multiple times in Star Fox, and perhaps you can inject some of that afterwards.
Starwolf theme, pretty damn good.
Yeah, and like I said, it's been remixed and stuff, so it's not a case of that the music isn't good. But what's probably more memorable from Lylat Wars is some of the voice clips and stuff. In that game, there's over 700 different voice clips, which is over 15 stages. So on each one of those stages, that means you've got close on to approximately 50 voice clips per stage. And I mean, you have games now which have hours and hours and hours of music and voice work and stuff, but this was on a Nintendo 64 cartridge, and this is coming from Starwing on the Super Nintendo, where you had effectively 4 sounds.
Yeah,
indeed.
I thought that had a charm. I thought that we were talking about this earlier, but we should bring it up now. I think I preferred that in some ways because Slippy's voice is annoying. What do you have to say to
Slippy's voice is meant to be annoying. It's not just that the player is annoyed at Slippy's voice in Star Fox 64. Your teammates are annoyed at him. In the very first stage, one of the first times you're introduced to him is quit dinking around, Slip. As in, you're introduced to your 4 characters, and one of your other characters tells one of the characters, you're annoying. Stop being annoying.
We should all stop dinking around.
Yeah. And
eternal wisdom there.
Even as you progress through the stages, one of the branches in the stages, Slippy comes in to help during a boss fight, and he gets swatted out of the air and knocked down onto a different planet. And it's the only way you can get to that route is by Slippy dinking around.
Yeah, that is 2 interesting points, because I wrote down a brief list of just the straight differences between the 2 games at the bottom of the notes, and you've just addressed 2 of those, which is obviously the gibberish versus the amazing voice acting. And I will admit to Lloyd that there is certain charm with the gibberish, but the voice acting blew my mind. Like, the gibberish has a kind of nostalgic quality. Oh, these little sound bites are funny, but hearing voice acting on the Nintendo 64 was amazing.
I'm losing them.
You do also have, in Star Fox 64 Lylat Wars, you do have the option as well of going into the sound, and because Nintendo know people love things from the past, the option of selecting Lylation is there to get the gibberish effect on those voices. Did you enjoy hearing them as speaking actual voices at the end of that game?
Yeah, that was exciting.
Yeah, so wasn't it better to hear their voices rather than the gibberish? It gives them more character when you can actually hear what they're saying. And I felt that it built the characters around you, because you got the feeling of Falco in the intro again. Falco is told to check something in his ship. He says, I got it. This is fine. My G diffuser system is perfect. Halfway through the first thing, it's like, I've got problems with this G diffuser. Help, I'm in trouble. And if you don't chase after him and save him there, he will get shot down. Again, that's another branching point for the game.
Yeah, and that is one of the other differences I wanted to bring up between the 2 games, is that Star Fox or Starwing has 3 paths, basically easy, medium, and hard. You pick them, and that's basically it.
It sort of makes it more of that game feeling of Pat A, B, and C. You're relying on your imagination rather than the game's ability to tell a story.
I'm going to make one last point regarding why I think Starwing's a better game. I mentioned about the greater... you made some really good points about atmosphere there, but I think there was some really amazing atmosphere in Starwing in particular, because there were some bosses in that game that, for example, the Andros boss, it literally did scaring the bejesus out of me, where on the final path, the Andros base, you blow up the Andros face and you blow up the queue, and you're like, oh yeah, I've done this before in the easier paths, and then suddenly it morphs into this demon bulldog face with narrower eyes and a wider mouth. It basically looks like Satan itself has now come to attack you. As a kid, it was a bit of a nightmare for you. I was like, what the hell is this?
It is a devil's head.
It's a devil's head. It was actually freaky as hell. And that kind of stuff, in terms of emotional impact, I actually thought was really, really powerful. The music is the biggest driving force for emotional impact in those games. I think David put it well, it's more of a feeling than a straight narrative point that Lylat Wars would employ. But I just felt more charged by Starwing than Lylat Wars.
Say, when When it comes to Lylat Wars, with its version of Andros, the easy path from that is pretty much shown to you to not be Andros. The very first time you arrive there on the easiest path, you get Robot Andros. It is not a living being. Early on in the narration, the introduction to the game, the lines of the plot tells you he's a scientist, and if you go the easy path, you're greeted with the giant robot head Andros. And it's not until the hardest path where you destroy it and then you get his true form, which is the brain and flying eyes and weird infight.
One of the most classic lines of computer game dialogue is the "So Andros, you show your true form," which I think became a meme all in itself.
There is so many memes that come from those voice lines of "do a barrel roll." If you type it into Google, Google will do a barrel roll. That is from one of the 700 voice lines.
And I can't let you do that, Starfox.
Yeah, indeed. Or when you talk about imagining different things, because obviously you have these parts which are a case of you imagine you're going through this, you imagine you're going through that. But one of them that I always love is you get a call to your R-Wing. If you answer the call, it's from Andros. And it is a case of, it's the son of James McLeod, the pilot that I've killed, apparently, before you've arrived. Andros trying to put you down before you get into his home planet. And the one thing I love is the fact that you also have the option of not answering that phone call.
I love not answering that phone call.
It is fantastic to just picture Andros just waiting in his office. It's ringing. I'm sure he's going to pick up, you guys. I'm going to tell him how much I owned his phone. He's not answering me. I think he's destroying my bosses and ships instead. Damn.
We can see him on the security cameras. We can see his phone is ringing. Is he ignoring me?
I can clearly see he's not answering this goddamn phone. No, he's destroyed more of my ship.
Ghosting Andros.
Yeah, you're just like, poor Andros is sitting there and like, yeah, you're just ignoring his phone call because you played this before and you don't want to hear shit about it. It's just power on. I love that thought in my head of Andros is trying to call you and you're just like, no, you don't have a Nova Bomb for me. I'm not answering this call. Early on in the game, the enemies are quite confident and the idea is that you're not leaving here. You're not going to do your mission. But by the time you progress through to some of the later on missions, like the Area 6, they're on the lookout for you. And you have a set of enemy ships who are just panicked. Their voice is completely panicked. I think Cayman is one of the lead fighters.
Cayman here, no problems.
Yeah, indeed.
Do you copy? Emergency maneuvers!
Oh shit, he's made it this far. And there is just panic as you get through.
Some moderator you are.
Yeah, I like a good quote.
Yeah, that is.
God damn it.
Lloyd, I'll throw you one now. You ready? Blinky bling, blink, blink, bling. Brought a tiny polygonal tear to my eye.
And then
Maybe said do a barrel roll in the original Starwing. You could do barrel rolls.
Yeah,
but I know it only
what
became
quota voice on them? Do a barrel roll.
Because there were no memes back then.
Well, there were memes.
There was no internet back then.
One very brief thing I wanted to ask you guys about is that each game came with a revolutionary technology for the time. Starwing came with the FX chip. Lylat Wars on the N64 came with the Rumble Pack.
Yeah,
both
first
of
game
these,
to use it.
Both of these had fairly strong effects on the game industry and Nintendo in particular. Could you speak about them in brief detail? Lloyd, I'll pass over to you first.
Okay, the FX chip was a graphics accelerator chip. It allowed true 3D graphics to be displayed on the Super Nintendo. It was developed by Argonaut Software, which was a British company. These were actually just kids that went over. They were dragged over to Japan, and to develop this, it allowed the SNES to produce true 3D graphics, which was not even believed to be possible until these guys. There really was, on consoles certainly, nothing like Starwing.
Vincent, Rumble Pack.
The Rumble Pack was included with Lylat Wars. It added an actual feedback to games. Like the Rumble Pack was completely left of field. It was a case you destroy a boss and you feel Rumble is now in most platforms and devices, even in mobile phones. But this was the first time it was introduced in video games to show you, in effect, you set off a bomb and your hands rumble. It was actually giving you some force feedback. So I think in terms of, it wasn't necessarily a design that was going to happen. It was, I think there was definitely some extra thinking went into how do you put the player like they're more in the video game.
I do remember my sort of parabolic arc of experiencing Rumble, starting from setting off a Nova Bomb to, this is pretty cool, going all the way up to when you crash a train into a petrol station and it explodes for about 45 solid seconds. You're like, come on now lads, you're taking the piss, this is hurting my hands. And as someone who is promoting the N64 at Rumble Pack, you, Vince, personally though, if given the option, always turn Rumble off.
Oh yeah, I despise Rumble. I hate it. Absolutely despise
Kind of
it.
weakens your case a little.
Well, Nintendo are great and all that. The innovation was good, but you experience it throughout some games, and depending on how you feel towards it, you can leave it off.
Just wrapping up a little bit, I want to ask you guys in turn, have you been swayed away from your original argument by the presentations of your opposition? I'm going to go to Lloyd first.
I think you make some very strong arguments about how the voice acting, it really did help with atmosphere. I do also remember really, really fondly that Area 6 level, because I do quite like my video game music. Bar maybe the Star Wolf theme, that's probably the strongest track in that game for a sense of adventure as you're decimating through the final ranks of the Venom Space Force. That Area 6 is that's a really strong piece. And the panic in their voices, that's a really strong piece. So you make a very, very strong case for Lylat Wars atmosphere in that one.
Vincent, are you swayed by Lloyd's arguments about Starwing?
About Starwing being a great game, I would never dispute that. Starwing is an incredible game. It is one of my favorites of all times. Like, I'm not saying that Starwing is not a good game, but I will always think that Lylat Wars is the better game just in terms of what it presents on screen. Starwing works now with nostalgia, where if you go back and actually play through it, the frame rate is what most modern gamers would find to be pretty much unplayable, whereas Lylat Wars, it dips at times in terms of technology, but still, it is possible to play that in 2019 and still have an enjoyable experience. I find far more than the original Starwing. The technology limits are just slightly too high.
Yeah, just to discuss my own biases briefly, I have played crap tons of Lylat Wars, like lots and lots and lots and lots of Lylat Wars. And I think I only played Starwing as a little stupid kid, and I think I was only good enough to beat it on the easy path. So I would not like to give a final judgment as the moderator, but just looking at your faces, Lloyd looks uncertain in his argument and Vince looks 100% confident in his. So if I'm basing it on your reaction to this discussion, I'm going to have to give it to Lylat Wars and Vince.
I think for today we're going to have to go with Remake. Remake was better. I'm giving it to you, Vince. I think you've swayed the panel here.
They're both fantastic games.
They're both fantastic games. I think your winning argument was that which is playable today.
That's all from us on Remake or Demake. I've been David Sheehan, and thank you to Lloyd Fitzgibbon and Vincent O Brien. To play us out, we're going to play the Starwolf theme from Lylat Wars. Goodbye.